What's up, NFL fans? Welcome back to another episode of For Your Viewing Pleasure, where we preview the upcoming week in the National Football League. We're in week 14. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Wesley Coleman. What's up, Wesley? How's it going?
Doing good, man. We're getting really close to some playoff. You can start looking at some actual playoff matchups of who you're going to be playing, and if we're going to face those teams in the last few weeks, maybe for us setting up a playoff previews.
Absolutely. It's going to be really interesting down the stretch in a couple division races. I know the Kansas City Chiefs have already locked up a playoff spot. They're the only team, if I've read that correctly, that has locked up a playoff spot. I feel like with Detroit, it's just a foregone conclusion.
Buffalo's won their
Buffalo
division.
did as well. They clinched the division.
Beyond a playoff spot, they have.
How bad is that? How bad is that? A division is clinched before week 14.
So there's only 3 other times in history that teams have clinched the division with 5 games left. All 3 of those teams went to the Super Bowl.
Oh,
all 3 of them lost the Super Bowl.
What are they, all the Bills?
But all 3 of them went to the Super Bowl. We also, I believe, have 4 teams that have been eliminated from playoff contention, with the Giants, Raiders, Jaguars, and Patriots.
All right. So we're narrowing the field. We're narrowing the field for sure. So this week 14, we always start off this show, in case it's your first time checking it out, with previewing the primetime slate of games. So Thursday night might be the game of the week. It's the Green Bay Packers going to Detroit to play the Lions. The Packers are 9-3. If they have any prayer of staying alive for a division title, they have to win this game. You have to win this game. That is the Thursday night game. Let's go through the others though before we talk about these, because I'm sure we're going to talk about them in must-watch games. On Sunday night, another good one, Chargers Chiefs. Again, Chargers need to keep pace with the teams, one of them which the Denver Broncos won again on Monday Night Football. And then Monday night, that's kind of a dud. That's the Cincinnati Bengals going down to Dallas to play the Cowboys. So there's some good games here. Let's just bleed this into must-watch games, because we know the Packers-Lions is going to be on that list. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's I know you said it might be the game of the week. I think it's head and shoulders above being the game of the week. And it ties into, so the Packers are in 3rd place. If they lose this game, they fall pretty deep into 3rd place, because I'm just going to assume that the Vikings will probably beat the Falcons. The Falcons have been not great the last month or so, or the whole season. So the Vikings beat them, the Packers lose to the Lions, the Packers fall pretty deep into 3rd place, where I mean, competing for the division is not a chance, and then they're almost kind of guaranteed a 6-7 seed.
Yeah. And when you look at what the Packers have left, they are going to be able to, if they win this game, if they can find a way to win on Thursday night, that's going to be a tough task to do that in Detroit. But then they go to Seattle. Then they host the Saints. Then they go to Minnesota, and they finish with the Bears in week 18.
So you're saying they could lose every game the rest of the season? Is that what you're saying, Jeff?
No. I'm saying if they lose on Thursday night, then like you said, at 9-4, and assuming that the Vikings continue to win, they would have to basically win out, and the fact that they still play the Minnesota Vikings would help them. But like you said, that they're putting themselves in such a hole in the division. They're looking at a wild card berth, and they're probably going to be, like you said, a 6 or 7 seed. And so this game is huge for Detroit. I mean, it's important. You want to win the division, but what does Detroit have coming up? After this week, they host the Bills. Should be a game. They go to the Bears. They go to the San Francisco 49ers and finish up with the Vikings. So I think this is a really, really intriguing game for those bettors out there. Detroit's giving only 3.5 points. I thought that was a little low.
Can you imagine the first round of the playoffs being a 12 or 13 win Packers team going on the road to Philly?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a scenario in there where, I mean, it's more likely that they go to Seattle or Atlanta or Arizona, something like that. But somebody's probably going to get ran over. Even though I'm not a huge Packers fan, I think it's a little bit padded with their record, but it's going to look weird.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You've on this show all year, you've never been a believer in Jordan Love. You thought that the contract he received was inflated, and you just said it. You've never really felt that the Packers were legitimate contenders. They've also won some pretty good games down the stretch. Has anything changed in terms of you viewing both Jordan Love and the Packers?
So I don't think Jordan Love's terrible. I just don't think he deserves to be the highest paid quarterback in football or a top
Fair.
10. I mean, based on what he had done before that. And I think he still makes some great throws, but he also looks like a guy that, basically earned that contract in 2 games last year. So it's just kind of back and forth. And I, I, I just hate the precedent that it sets of overpaying somebody because like it's really hard to find a quarterback. So I found a top 20 quarterback, so now I got to pay them like they're the number one quarterback.
Yeah. That's the way the league's trending, I mean, it's just like, who's the next guy, and he's gonna wanna be paid this amount of money. It's gonna be interesting to see how that goes down for a couple quarterbacks. A guy like Brock Purdy, I'm very intrigued with what happens there with him and his contract negotiations. But let's continue to move on. I think another must-watch game is the Sunday night game. I think Chargers-Chiefs has a lot of intrigue. The Kansas City Chiefs are winning. They're not doing it in a pretty fashion. I know that a lot of people are saying, well, they're still winning. Can't take that away from them. It doesn't matter how you win. That's fact. You can't debate that. But I think that I watched a lot of the Black Friday game against the Raiders last week, and it was not pretty. It was not pretty. In a way, maybe this is way too early to say this. I said this about the Philadelphia Eagles last year, and I compared them to the 2020 Pittsburgh Steelers. The 2020 Pittsburgh Steelers went 11-0, and even the fans of the Steelers said, this is not sustainable. What they're doing is not sustainable. And the wheels fell off down the stretch. People started to figure it out, and they ended up being a one and done in the postseason. They lose to the Cleveland Browns at home. I said the same thing about Philly last year. They did fall apart. I don't think Kansas City's going to fall apart, but I just don't see the same Chiefs team that I have in years past. And I know that they can get hot at any time, but this Chargers team, even though it's an Arrowhead, this is going to be a good game. Kansas City's giving 4. What's your take on this one?
Yeah, I think my difference and I was hard on the Eagles last year, and when they had 9 and 10 wins and only 1 or 2 losses, and it said they weren't that good, in which
Right.
this feels weird to say that about a team with that many wins. My difference with that Steelers team and that Eagles team is I would watch those games and go, they were not the best team, and they still won. I watch these Chiefs game, and I go, well, they're not the normal Chiefs, but I don't think they're the worst team. I just think that it's a 50-50 toss-up game. And
Okay.
the Chiefs end up coming. And so that's a slight difference. If I was watching these Chiefs games going, oh, this other team's better, and the Chiefs just happen to win, I think all the games have been like kind of a toss-up at the end. And it's 50-50. I'm like, wow, they could lose. Not that they should lose. And so it's just kind of a difference. And so I think when you get to the playoffs, all games supposedly we're going to get down to like 1-score games if you're doing it right. And kind of having the great quarterback and a pretty good defense. I'm just not going to write them off. I think that them and the Bills are going to have an enormous clash. And I really think it matters who's got the home field advantage for that as much as any game you're going to see in the playoffs, because those are going to be 2 hotly contested games. That's going to be, they're 2 teams that can go all the way.
So let me ask you about Kansas City. There were in years past, I'd even say last year, there were times where you're thinking to yourself, if your favorite team, whoever that is playing Kansas City, it doesn't matter where you're playing, you're saying we have to have a perfect game to have a chance. I can't say that I feel that way about this Chiefs team. Do you agree that they can be had?
Sure, but I think they've done all this without their best wide receiver and without their best running back, who are now coming back.
Okay, if that's fair.
Brown and Pacheco are coming back. They're, supposedly healthy and ready to play over the next few weeks. So yes, I think they can be had for sure. I just think it looks different to us because it's not the normal way we've seen the Chiefs. They've gone in a couple of years from offensive dominant to defensive dominant, and it just it's a different look.
Interesting with when you talk about the Bills and who's going to potentially have the first seed. So the Chiefs 11-1, they don't have the head-to-head, so that's going to be big in terms of tiebreakers. They have the Chargers this week, then they go to Cleveland, then they host the Texans, they go to Steelers on Christmas Day, and they finish up with the Broncos team, which is surprising a lot of people with how they're moving the ball. And so that's an interesting stretch of games. The Texans are not playing up to what most people had in terms of their expectations, but I think this game, again, just like I said with the Thursday night game, is really important for the Chiefs. They can't lose one of these games, and flip up because now all of a sudden then Buffalo's like, oh, you just left the door open, and now you're going to have to be coming to Orchard Park if we play in the postseason.
Well, and then Buffalo, they do play the Lions, but besides the Lions, they play the Rams, Patriots, Jets, and Patriots. Like the Lions and Bills, that's going to be a fun game. It's in Detroit. And I mean, even if you chalk that up as a Bills loss, I don't think the Bills are losing to the Rams, Patriots, Jets, or Patriots.
No.
Like I don't know how bad they would have to play to or
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, the Chiefs can't drop these games. I mean, they definitely have a more competitive schedule moving forward, especially playing against some pretty stout defenses.
Absolutely. And so, any other must-watch games on the docket this week for you?
I mean, listen, somebody is going to win the NFC West, and with, I promise, like it's going to happen. And if you're talking about, I mean, Arizona and Seattle, it's hard to believe in the 49ers. Both of their running backs are going on IR now. Mason and McCaffrey are going on IR, not like just missing this week. They're missing. So I just think that, it comes down to this when we had this, they played each other in Seattle a couple of weeks ago. Arizona, kind of laid an egg. Arizona's continued to do that up and down thing. So again, somebody's got to win that division. And I think whoever wins, it's a scary team to go on the road and go play, even if you've got a much better record than them. I just don't know if I think they can ugly up a game and make some surprising plays, both teams.
Yeah, the Cardinals are coming off that loss. It was a close game against the Minnesota Vikings last week. And you have to think if Seattle wins this game, they're 8-5, and they have the driver's seat to winning that division.
Tiebreaker over everybody, basically.
Exactly. And so the Rams and the Bills, the Rams need to win one if they have a prayer as well. They're 6-6. If they win it, they're 7-6. If Seattle loses, then it's this hodgepodge. But I think the same could be said about the NFC South. I mean, the division that you follow. I mean, you have the Buccaneers. They're 6-6 and in first place. Do they have first place over the Falcons?
No, Atlanta does.
Okay. All right. So
Atlanta's
in first. I don't know. Let's shift gears, though, and let's talk about fantasy lineups. Fantasy lineups, games where you're like, hey, this is a matchup. These are games. These are players that you should probably watch. What comes to mind?
Well, I mean, Buffalo and the Rams both have a lot of people that have been drafted on fantasy lineups that you're going to have and you're going to talk about. And I think that probably a lot of those people have underwhelmed us this year. I mean, there's been a few that have been good, but for all the players that I would talk about for the Rams, they just haven't been consistent. Some of it because of injury, and then some of it just with Cooper Kupp this last week throws up 0 stats in a game when he should have, I thought, had great stats against the Saints. I'm going to go Cincinnati, Dallas here, just because I think you've got a lot of Cincinnati people that can put up a lot of points here. And same can be said that if you've got any of the individual defensive players, Micah Parsons could have like a career week against the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line at the same time of Joe Burrow putting up a ton of points as well.
Yeah, and the Dallas Cowboys, they've had some weapons score some fantasy points. CeeDee Lamb.
I think CeeDee Lamb's leading the league in receptions. I think
he's like their only receiving option. So yeah, so often. I like where you went with Bills and Rams. I'll also say if you have Minnesota Vikings, I would start them. Yep. They're going against Atlanta. Minnesota has, Justin Jefferson is a must start no matter what. Jordan Addison's been playing better. Aaron Jones is finding his groove as a running back. I like that game. If you're looking for a one-sided affair, also the Philadelphia Eagles against the Panthers, although the Panthers defense has been a little bit better than we thought the last few weeks. The Eagles, you're going into, if you don't start Saquon Barkley, you should be immediately kicked out of your league.
I mean, he went against the number 2 rushing defense last week, and it didn't matter at all.
No, it didn't. And it was one of those games where you knew what was coming. They knew what was coming. Everyone knew what was coming, and they still couldn't stop it. Any other fantasy games that you see on this week of games?
I mean, Jameis Winston did just throw for 497 yards, so or if you count interception return yards, he threw for like 670, whatever that. I can't believe they're saying they're actually putting out there. He set a record for most yardage thrown for if you counted the return yards and it's the most in NFL history. I'm like, well, No, that's I mean, there's some other ones there that just kind of low. I mean, we talked about Green Bay, Detroit.
Yeah.
Green Bay's got they both have running backs and they both have wide receivers that are they're putting up stats, and then now also tight ends for both teams as well.
I'll say this about Detroit, and I don't do standard fantasy football. I do daily fantasy football in a league, and it's so difficult for me to put any Lions in my lineup because you have a game where Jared Goff throws for 98 yards, yet they rush for 400. It seems like, and you're like, dang, I started Jared Goff, or you start Amon-Ra St. Brown, and it's not Amon-Ra St. Brown that goes off. It's Jameson Williams, I think is his name, or you have the Montgomery, and it's just they have a ton of weapons, tough to figure out. But let's go to sneaky good matchups. Are there any games that pop off the screen in terms of games that most people aren't going to talk about that could be pretty good this week?
I mean, if we're just talking about them being, I mean, besides the ones we've talked about, um, the I don't think that the Carolina Eagles game is necessarily as crazy as far as Carolina's been doing some things right the last few weeks.
Uh-huh.
I know that you said that. I mean, that this Philadelphia -12, and I would definitely. I don't know if I don't know if I'm gonna stick with that. I think that's a huge number. Carolina's been putting up some points lately. I'm not sure if the Eagles' defense is necessarily the strongest part of that. I think that they're going to have a letdown coming off the biggest win they've had in years, I would
Yep.
say. I mean, outside of playoff games, years and years for them. I think that game could actually be kind of fun. And I've hated on Bryce Young. Couldn't believe when he was drafted where he was, and watched him personally be terrible. He's actually got 4 or 5 games in a row now of not being a bad quarterback at all.
Almost like, sometimes guys just need to take a step back and be able to, see it, learn it, figure it out. Maybe he's figuring it out. Let's hope so. I like that. I could also see, this is going to sound crazy, but if you're just looking for a game that could be wild, you don't know what's going to happen. Tampa Bay seems like they're a team that no matter when they play, like crazy crap happens. And it's a close game most games. Baker Mayfield is a complete crapshoot. You don't know what you're going to get from Baker. And the Raiders are still playing tough football at 2-10. They're coming off that Black Friday game. A lot of people said they should have won that game. The Aiden O'Connell botched snap at the end, which somehow was a procedure penalty, yet they gave it to the Chiefs. I don't know. I'm not here to talk about Black Friday's game, but that Raiders Buccaneers game could be a sneaky good matchup in terms of one that you're like, I'll turn it on, and it might be an up and down affair. You never know. We'll see.
Did you want to talk about the Saints versus Giants matchup at all? Like, is it?
I was going to
Depending on
talk
who
about that. I was
who's
going to talk about that in another category. So let's do. You can only watch one. You can only watch one game. It's one of just a handful of games this week. But which game are you? I gotta watch this one no matter what.
Man, I would be between the Thursday night game and the Monday night game, Green Bay, Detroit, and Cincinnati, Dallas, and it's just really because I hate Dallas so much.
I was gonna
Watching
say,
them,
are you making the mistake?
they
Did you mean to
they
say Sunday night?
they might give up a 50 burger, and I would just love watching the Cowboys crowd leave at halftime. But it's Green Bay, Detroit. I think it's an important game for both of them. Detroit's had a killer run of, I mean, playing difficult teams that are projected to be in the playoffs or are definitely fighting for something. I think that they've been over the last couple of months, a lot of teams kind of in season Super Bowl where teams are hyping up for them and they're just murdering everybody
Yep.
and embarrassing them. This is, again, Detroit's already kind of put their stamp on a few teams this year. If they do it at home against Green Bay, it kind of closes the door on any chance of Green Bay coming back and winning this division, but it also just really, again, hypes up the Detroit versus Philadelphia Eagles game in the NFC Championship game that just seems to be impending.
Seems inevitable.
Yeah,
It does.
I mean,
I'm going to go with the Sunday night game because you know what? The Chiefs have entered rarefied air with me. They are akin now to the 2000s Patriots where I just want to see them fall apart. Like
you're
I
picking
just
them like I would the Cowboys. Like I just want to see them
exactly.
lose.
Yes, I just want to see like Chargers come on, rise up, don't Charger up a game and beat the doors off of the Chiefs. Like on a prime time stage, nothing would be better and make me happier than for the Chiefs to lose at home in convincing fashion, so that people like me that have been saying for weeks now, I think the Chiefs are kind of frauds, can say, haha, I was right. Even if it was just for a week. Like that's where they are with me. I can't stand the Chiefs. It's just it's because they win too much, and it's envy. That's all it is. It's jealousy. You wish your team was that good. If I'm a Chiefs fan, I'm reveling in all this stuff because they're still 11-1. But that's just where I stand right now.
Is there a little bit extra there because 3 of the Chiefs' wins this year came with controversial referee flags, not flags, calls? I mean, there's a real route to. I mean, the Chiefs could have lost 5 games this year, and 3 of them would have been on just if there just hadn't been a penalty called. They probably would have lost them. Is there any of that to you as well? As like this,
Yeah.
there definitely seems there's. I don't believe there's a conspiracy, but there's enough evidence to support one.
I do believe there's a conspiracy. I love conspiracies, and I think there is one here that the NFL, the Chiefs are the darlings right now. And so they're going to bend over backwards for him. They're going to give him the spots. They're going to give him the calls. I mean, the end of that game on Friday, Wesley, like, I don't know. So if there was a procedural penalty, how do the Chiefs get the ball? A procedural, I don't know.
Because it doesn't stop the clock. So they declined the penalty and just took the fumble.
Okay, so I'm not.
It's definitely weird.
Come on, Chargers.
If the Chiefs make the Super Bowl this year, will the EA Madden cover be Taylor Swift? Is that a thing?
I don't even know. I don't even know if the NFL is even dipping their toes into those waters anymore. Like they'll show her when she's there, but it's not like it was last year. I'm just sick of seeing the Chiefs win. I'm sick of seeing Patrick Mahomes and his little mannerisms that drive me crazy. It was the same with Tom Brady back in the day. So this is not new for me. Okay. I'm a jealous fan. I wish that my team was winning these games like they are, and they're not, but that's neither here nor there. Okay. Let's go to dud of the week. What is your dud of the week? There's a lot of options in this week's slate of games.
Yeah, I've got 2 options. I'm just going to go ahead and spoil it for you. I'm going to take the Saints and the Giants.
Oh.
The Saints have struggled with injuries. I think that 8 out of 11 of our offensive starters are not playing anymore. And
Taysom Hill's done for the year, right? ACL.
There's probably it looks like a lot more than ACL, but ACL is the minimal of what's done, and it's really close to might be the end of Taysom Hill's career because he'll be 35 at the start of next year and all. But he was kind of like the last thing hanging on that could make a game interesting. And again, it was a 1-score game. The Saints got down to the 4-yard line with a minute left to would have been able to tie to the game. But this Giants team is just going through as bad of a year as a franchise maybe could be. And it just looks super bleak for their future. But this Saints Giants game is obviously it probably looks like it's going to be played in like 35-degree weather that feels like it's 20 or something like that. It just probably is going to be a really, really ugly game.
I see that. I raise you a Jaguars Titans. So Jaguars are going to be without Trevor Lawrence, who's in NFL's concussion protocol. We saw that the linebacker that hit him was suspended for 3 games. And going against the Tennessee Titans at 3-9 with Will Levis, I just don't know. There's not a lot of redeeming factors in a 2-10 versus 3-9 game. I'll tell you what game is close though. And I don't know if you were going to say this, but Jets Dolphins, like, what is there to watch? I mean, the Dolphins are done. Even they're not going to win out. We saw what happened in Green Bay. The team still can't win in cold weather. And do we really want to watch Aaron Rodgers out there still?
Does Aaron Rodgers get benched in this game if it's bad at halftime?
Does Aaron Rodgers want to play?
I mean, it's definitely an interesting one. It's terrible.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a couple of these games, but I don't know. It's there are some games, and every week we say there's studs, and some of these games turn out to be very competitive and compelling and fun to watch, and that's really what we want. We just want to be entertained. So,
I know this isn't what the show's about, but you mentioned the hit on Trevor Lawrence. I'm just going to say screw that guy. I'm not going to say his name, but as soon as I saw it, thought it was dirty. Couldn't believe it. It was terrible. And then I saw his apology, and I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, if you're going to make that mistake, I get it. It's a fast-moving game. Everybody makes mistakes. I liked the apology. And then a few minutes later, I saw a highlight video of his where he's done this a lot. He's hit people out of bounds, way out of bounds, really hard, many times. He hit one guy 3 yards out of bounds and then jumped up and punched the guy's teammate in the face. screw that guy. And the 3 games, I mean, is a lot for that one hit, but that's not what it's about. This is a track record of this guy kind of being a jackass, and it's pretty terrible. I hope he's got some teammates that are also telling him he's a jackass too.
Yeah, and if his history wasn't there, I would stand up for the defender because I
Me
always
too. Me
try
too.
to.
Yep. Fast game.
It is,
Never know.
it is, and it's tough, and sometimes go back to last year's AFC wildcard game in Buffalo, Pittsburgh, and Josh Allen had a play where the Steelers defense thought he was going to slide. He didn't slide. He ends up running him for a touchdown. You're in a lose-lose situation, but the 3-game suspension, when you look back at his history, and it's not Vontez perfect history, but still it's enough. I think that it was fair, but yeah, that's unfortunate. You don't like to see any player unconscious on the turf. You can see the arms tensing up. That is a telltale sign that they're unconscious. And then a fight's breaking out all around them. You're like, oh my God, get the guy that's unconscious out of there. This could be bad. Yep. So, all right.
I mean, I do miss my 80s and 90s football that I grew up with and hard hits. And I think that, quarterbacks are football players too. And we've maybe gone a little too far with protecting them, but but this was a bad hit, and it doesn't have a place in the game.
No, it does not. That's a good way to end the show. Wesley, why don't you tell us where we can get your New Orleans Saints coverage, as well as where we can find you on social media?
Well, we're on the Dome Patrol podcast. You can find us on X at Dome Patrol PCast. Since you probably don't care about the Saints, if you just want to talk to me, my personal Twitter is at Wesley13. Jeff, where can we find you in your first place Pittsburgh Steelers coverage?
If you want to hear about the 9-3 Pittsburgh Steelers, you can find us at the Steel Curtain Network, wherever you get your podcast, search Steel Curtain Network, and then also steelcurtainnetwork.com. If you want to find me on social media at jhartman, HARTMAN _PIT. Wesley, man, enjoy the games this week, and we'll talk next week.
Thanks.